Hello, I'm Haley Perot. Welcome to Northwest Newsweek. The region's MPs are reacting to the 2024 federal budget released Tuesday. Cabinet Minister Patty Hajdu says her party's budget will be good for Northwestern Ontario, while Kenora MP Eric Melillo says he won't be supporting it. Lee Noonan has more.
The federal Liberals unveiled their 2024 budget yesterday in Ottawa. It includes more than $39 billion of net new spending over the next 6 years. Thunder Bay Superior North MP Patty Hajdu says much of the budget is aimed at making life more affordable for younger generations.
Well, there are a lot of great things in this budget that will affect residents of Northwestern Ontario, regardless of where people live all across the country.
Hajdu highlights the billions in funding for housing initiatives and the $1 billion school food program as budget items that will help in the region. There's also an increase in funding for FedNor.
New money to really focus on new technology and businesses and corporations that are looking to accelerate their growth in the area of new technology, AI, a variety of different kinds of technologies that we know that we're going to need in the years to come.
The budget also includes $89 million over 4 years for winter road and all-season road projects to remote First Nations. Kenora MP Eric Melillo isn't impressed.
It's always little local things that we try to work on and improve, but we have to look at the budget as an overall document, and overall it clearly misses the mark.
Melillo says the budget is high spend, high tax, and that he wants to see a cap on government spending and an end to the carbon tax.
What it really comes down to is it's not going to do anything to make life more affordable. It's going to continue to exacerbate the cost of living crisis that we're seeing in Northwestern Ontario and right across the country.
With quarterly carbon tax rebates having just gone out on the 15th, Hajdu says it's misleading to suggest that policy is responsible for an increase in cost of living. The minority Liberals will have to garner support for their budget to pass. Melillo says that will not be coming from him or his party. Lee Noonan, TBT News.
In response to a long-standing housing crisis in its territory, Anishinaabe Nation held a two-day summit in Thunder Bay. It began Wednesday morning and aimed to find community-based solutions to the housing shortage. The event featured a number of partners throughout the region engaging in panels and presentations to promote housing solutions. NAN Grand Chief Alvin Fiddler was at the summit on Wednesday and spoke about the federal budget released on Tuesday. He sees the push for more housing across the country, but feels the efforts are lacking in remote communities.
This federal government's idea of a housing crisis is what's happening in Vancouver or what's happening in Toronto. And yes, I recognize that there's housing needs in these major urban centers, but there was very little mention of the need for First Nation housing in our communities.
The Housing Summit wrapped up on Thursday. It's a big step forward in the effort to build an all-season road to Pikangikum First Nation. The long-awaited funding for the Barons River Bridge and Access Road was included in the 2024 federal budget.
Barron River Bridge will be funded, which is very exciting for the community of Pikangikum, but also for Frontier Lithium, who, as you know, is a lithium mining company in Northern Ontario, looking to very quickly accelerate their operations.
Projects like the lithium mine being developed by Frontier are key to the government's critical mineral strategy, according to Hajdu. The bridge has been in the planning stages for years and is a key piece of infrastructure to connect Pikangikum to the highway system. It would also improve winter road access for 6 other First Nations in the area: Deer Lake, Keewaywin, McDowell Lake, North Spirit Lake, Poplar Hill, and Sandy Lake. The 7 communities are the proponents of the project, which Hajdu says will improve their living conditions.
One of the big challenges around the infrastructure gap is actually being able to get equipment, people, and supplies to First Nations that are remote. And so, for example, it can cost triple the amount of money for somebody to build, a band office in Attawapiskat than it might be to build a similar building of similar quality in a road access community.
Exactly how much money will be allocated or when construction might start has yet to be announced. The road work that will connect the all-season road to Pikangikum and realign the winter roads for the north is planned after the completion of the bridge. The whole project is expected to take 3 years. The two health units in this region have decided not to support a voluntary merger. The boards of health with the Thunder Bay District Health Unit and Northwestern Health Unit have each passed resolutions saying they do not agree to a merger proposed by the Ford government. The NWHU catchment area includes Kenora and Rainy River districts, while the TBDHU also covers a large area spanning 230,000 square kilometers. Back in November, the two boards of health began exploring a possible merger at the request of the province. Any health units that got on board would have access to a 3-year merger support fund, but officials with both health units feel the sheer size of the merged agency would lead to service issues. And with tax levy charges much higher in the Northwestern Health Unit area, taxpayers here in Thunder Bay would end up paying more.
So to balance it out, the levies in the Thunder Bay District, which is Thunder Bay, all our area, would jump about 35%, which is huge. And if you consider the Thunder Bay, that's a huge, huge hit. So that is one area, even though, I mean, health isn't about dollars and cents necessarily. Okay, the other huge one was the geography involved. I mean, if you amalgamated those house units, you'd be going from Manitowoc, Marathon, basically to the Manitoba border. And that, you know, the government fails to realize, even though they say they don't, I don't think they realize, you know, how huge an area that is.
A media release issued by the NWHU said having one large health unit would also present challenges in ensuring that all 34 municipalities within the merged entity would have a voice under its governance structure. Local MPs Patty Hajdu and Marcus Pulowski say they'll make sure funding gets to the Thunder Bay District Social Services Board one way or another. This comes after a dispute between the federal and provincial governments caused the agency to lose over $4 million in funding for social housing. Jessica Clement has the details.
The head of the Thunder Bay DSAB called on local MPs Patty Hajdu and Marcus Pulowski for help last week after a dispute between the federal and provincial governments left the organization scrambling to make up a loss of over $4 million in funding.
Ask Minister Fraser to continue to provide the funding to Ontario so that we can receive our portion, so while they continue hopefully to negotiate the concerns that Canada has with Ontario's plan.
Hajdu notes in order for the funding to be delivered, Ontario has to prove the affordable housing is going to get built. She says Federal Housing Minister Sean Fraser has been working on a revised plan with the province, reflecting some of the challenges it's faced.
We do have a condition that they, by September, demonstrate how they're going to meet their full housing target. And I think this is what they're expecting of municipalities. So it's really no different than the kind of pressure provinces are putting on places like Thunder Bay.
If the dispute is not settled shortly, DSAB's renovations of existing housing units and other related programs could be in jeopardy. Hajdu adds that if an agreement can't be made, they'll look at alternative ways to make sure the money gets where it needs to go.
The CEO of DSAB, Mr. Bradica, has been very clear that this could have really deleterious effects on Indigenous peoples, on homeless peoples, on people that are vulnerable or living in poverty. I don't want to see that happen. Obviously, if we can't count on the province to share this responsibility of delivering this money, that will look to other mechanisms.
Pulowski says he's been reassured by the housing minister that one way or another, the $4 million will reach the DSAB soon. However, the federal government has not provided a timeline for when the funding will be provided due to the dispute.
It's hard to say because, I mean, it does seem like there's negotiations between the province and the feds. However, we're told, and this is in response to my inquiries from the ministry, that there is no scenario under which the federal government intends to change its decision to invest these funds in affordable housing in Ontario. So how quickly it's going to be, I'm not sure.
The board will have a meeting later this week to decide on how to handle the issue. Jessica Clement, TBT News.
Indigenous Services Minister Patty Hajdu says it's shocking and offensive that the Ford government is expecting federal funding for a much-needed new hospital in Kenora because of that area's large Indigenous population.
Where are the feds, right? Just like Sioux Lookout, these are hospitals that serve a critical mass of First Nations people.
Premier Doug Ford committed to building the new hospital at a news conference earlier this month, but offered no details. And although healthcare is a provincial responsibility, Indigenous Affairs Minister Greg Rickford suggested the high Indigenous population warranted a federal contribution to the project. Ford signed a $3 billion healthcare deal with Ottawa in February, and Haidu says that funding came with a commitment to improving healthcare equity in the province.
I was quite shocked that Ontario would not think that Indigenous peoples, indeed all peoples of Northwestern Ontario, have the right to equal access to healthcare. To imply that because Kenora has a dense population of Indigenous people in some way means that the people of Kenora are not the responsibility of the provincial government, I think that's quite frankly misguided and offensive to Indigenous peoples.
Haidu acknowledges that Ottawa does have an important role to play in delivering healthcare services to Indigenous people, particularly on reserves. But she says the province has the same responsibility to provide care to First Nations patients as to everyone else in Ontario. The township of Ignace hosted one final event last weekend before residents there will have to decide whether they want to host a repository for Canada's high-level nuclear waste. Hundreds came out to the Northwest Nuclear Exploration Event, which featured dozens of presenters. Lee Noonan has more.
Ignace hosted their Northwest Nuclear Exploration event at the Township Rec Center. Officials say more than 500 people attended over the 2 days as they prepare to cast a ballot on the question of whether to host a deep geological repository for nuclear waste.
I'm not worried about the safety of the whole deal being buried here. I'm not worried about the transportation of it here. What I am worried about is the development of Ignace. Is it going to harm us? Is it going to change us too much?
With panel discussions, a debate, and a list of 25 different exhibitors, there were opportunities to learn about many facets of the nuclear waste question.
We get most of our ideas about nuclear waste from The Simpsons, where it's green glowing goo, and that's not what nuclear waste looks like at all. It actually looks like metal around a ceramic much like your coffee mug. This does not dissolve in water. This is actually a material that, unless you're swallowing it, it's fine.
Claire Catrice is the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission's Director of Indigenous and Public Relations. She wants local residents to know that any plan to bury nuclear waste will have to go through their agency.
We're essentially like the nuclear police. We're the nuclear watchdog. We've got some real brainiacs working here in all areas of nuclear science, and their job is to review what this NWMO office is going to propose and go through all the science of it and just make sure that it's safe.
The Canadian Association of Nuclear Host Communities sent several representatives, including Blair Skinner, mayor of Pinawa, Manitoba. The town was established in the 1960s as the site of a nuclear research facility, which is currently being decommissioned.
Most people want to understand how comfortable people are living in a nuclear community. Many people moved away when the site closure was announced, but other people moved in who were not in the nuclear industry and bought houses.
There were a handful of anti-nuclear exhibitors at the event and a contingent of protesters outside. They're concerned about transportation of nuclear waste through the region and the possibility of water contamination at the site.
They haven't had an independent public environmental assessment. They are going to have an impact assessment, but we feel that this is probably just going to be a quick and dirty literature review. We want us, the public, involved. We want control over the process.
Voting will be held between the 26th and the 30th to determine whether local residents are willing to host the DGR. A decision by council is expected by the end of the summer. Lee Noonan, TBT News.
It's time now for a short break. When we come back, we'll hear from the children of Ignace about what they think of the nuclear waste repository. If Canada's Nuclear Waste Management Organization moves ahead with a deep geological repository for nuclear waste and chooses the Ignace Wabigoon site, it won't go into operation for decades. Lee Noonan spoke with some of Ignace's younger residents to see how they feel about the project.
The children of Ignace weren't born yet when the municipality first threw its hat in the ring as a prospective host community for a nuclear waste site. But they will be the ones who inherit the project if it goes ahead here.
Nuclear waste is a very powerful source of energy, and also it's the cleanest source of energy.
Okay, what else do you know about nuclear waste? Is it safe?
It can be if it's stored correctly, but if it isn't, then it's not safe.
25-year-old Dela de la Scal is an assistant scientist with the Nuclear Waste Management Organization in Ignace. She first started working for them as a biology student at Lakehead University. She says the career prospects the NWMO brings to Ignace are thrilling.
It's so exciting for me to be in this position and be able to speak based on my experiences growing up in the community and what I know the youth today are most likely going through, and trying to make a change for the better so that they can have great career aspirations and follow their passion.
The Deep Geological Repository is projected to start construction in 2036 and operations in 2043. A 12-year-old today has enough time to go and get their PhD in nuclear physics before the facility opens.
I think that it's a good idea to have it here in Ignace. It's a safe place to store all the nuclear materials and the uranium and all that stuff. So it's not sitting around just anywhere.
I think it's a great idea for our safety, and I learned a lot about it here at the NWMO Center in Ignace, and I think it's really good.
I think that if it goes good, then it'll be a great thing for the future, but if it doesn't, then our entire society will probably be halted for a few generations.
Ignace's willingness process includes focus groups with kids aged 11 to 15, and youth 16 and up are able to vote in the upcoming public survey.
Don't be scared. This is your future, and you need to voice your concerns. You need to voice your opinion and what you want to see in order to make that happen. No one's going to read your mind. Just step out, be brave. This is your community, and if you want to stay here and really love your life and inspire your passions, then come out and vote.
Lee Noonan, TBT News.
The Thunder Bay District Health Unit is launching its spring COVID-19 vaccine program, but unlike past few years, there will not be a public clinic set up on the CLE grounds. The Coliseum building has traditionally been the main location for area residents to either walk in or book appointments to get their dose, but that's no longer the case. Laura Dennis, the health unit's manager of the Vaccine and Preventable Diseases program, says they're instead encouraging people to go to pharmacies or their family doctor. They're recommending the vaccine for people over 65, those in long-term care homes, people with severe health conditions, or Indigenous people over 55. Dennis adds the health unit has a new service this spring.
We are also offering COVID vaccines to individuals who cannot leave their homes this spring. So we will be sending out teams to visit people in their homes if they aren't able to leave their homes and access a dose through a pharmacy. And we will be providing some clinics in some of our district communities as well who have limited access. If their pharmacy isn't administering in the community, we will be offering appointments in those district communities.
The health unit also has a limited number of COVID vaccine appointments for young children at their main office in Thunder Bay. Ontario's Transportation Minister was questioned by Kiiwetinoong MPP Sol Mamakwa this week regarding much-needed airport upgrades in remote First Nations. The ministry operates 27 airports in Anishinaabe Nation territory, which Mamakwa says requires up-to-date technology and maintenance. Although support and funding was mentioned, Mamakwa's desire for a timeline was not addressed.
The First Nations rely on these airports for critical goods and services. Speaker, the waiting areas are substandard, unsafe facilities for passengers and pilots alike. The airports in Kiiwetinoong still need runway extensions and modern navigational aids to improve the flight access. Speaker, when will the waiting areas in these airports be held up to standard and make sure that these runways are extended.
And I can assure the member that we'll continue to work with them as the province has provided a commitment to 100% of the remote funding on the operational side, $14.5 million every single year. But we'll continue and share those issues that have been raised by that member with respect to some of the flooding are taken care of, and that we work together to ensure that those are fixed so we can continue to support that vital piece of infrastructure in our north.
It's time now for another short break. When we return, we'll hear about a documentary regarding the planned roads to the Ring of Fire.
A Native who wants economic development, and they want a mine, they want roads, like they want to change the future for their children. I think they're ready for that leadership from us.
A local Anishinaabe filmmaker is making waves with his documentary about 2 projects to build roads into the Ring of Fire. The film, called Bridges to the North, officially premiered in Toronto earlier this month. Lee Noonan has more.
Bridges to the North is a documentary about roads that don't exist. The proposed roads that would connect the isolated First Nations of Martin Falls and Webequie to the highway network and the Ring of Fire.
Poor places with no opportunity.
Water issues, socioeconomic issues.
They are hundreds of kilometers away from any kind of permanent road system.
Thunder Bay filmmaker Tony McGuire is a member of Bingwini First Nation and says it was important to approach the story from an Indigenous perspective and challenge preconceptions about First Nations people.
A Native who wants economic development, and they want a mine, they want roads, like they want to change the future for their children. I think they're ready for that leadership from us, and it can be, I think it could be, it's hard on people that they're just used to just this one stereotype. And so if this film can break that and show that we dream big, that we're willing to take steps that are large, that we're willing to take on the government and the business, and we're doing it under our own leadership, I think if we can dispel that stereotype, then I'm super happy as a filmmaker.
The chiefs of both Webequie and Martin Falls were promoting the film at the recent Indigenous-led Projects Forum in Toronto.
We need to see prosperity in our community. We need to see development. We need to see, our young people prosper from the resources that are out there.
And our story is one of perseverance, one of resilience, one of hopes of reconciliation and moving forward together.
The movie's executive producer, Qasim Siddiq, is project director on the Martin Falls Access Road and project co-lead for the Northern Road Link. He was also an organizer of the ILFP conference. McGuire says it was surreal for his film to be recognized in front of a high-powered audience that included Premier Doug Ford.
You're like, this is for me. So I stood up and I spilled my coffee all over the table. But it was pretty gratifying. I'm glad I'm here.
For those who would like to see the movie, McGuire is still working out the distribution, but in the meantime, he says he'll provide a copy to anyone who reaches out through his website at theymedia.com. Lee Noonan, TBT News.
That's all for this edition of Northwest Newsweek. We'll be back next week with more of the top stories from across the region.